Cut the music.
Got it. We're cutting it. We're cutting it.
Get rid of it.
We are cutting it.
Throw it out.
Oh, man. Oh, man. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Celtics Talk Weekly postgame show. I am your host, Rob Haytain. Joined with me is my co-host, Nick Franco. Guys, the Celtics drop probably what has been, or I would consider, the ugliest game that we've seen out of the Boston Celtics in probably over 2 years now. The Celtics falling 117-116 in the first game of the Emirates NBA In-Season Cup or tournament. The Celtics at home now falling to 3-2 on the year, guys. 9-3 is their record on the season so far, Franco. However, before we get started and we jump into kind of what went wrong tonight, give us your overall thoughts, reactions. I mean, I know it's not going to be a good one tonight. I can see it in your eyes. I know you're pissed off.
Man, that was one of the most throwaway games I've seen the Celtics play. They were facing a short-handed Hawks team without Trae Young, without DeAndre Hunter, without Bojan Bogdanovic. Those players are all three key players. I think the Celtics kind of washed over this game. Hawks put up a great performance against us, and that's what's going to be expected during this NBA Cup. Obviously,
Right.
Celtics aren't going to be too focused on this NBA Cup. They're looking at this more as a regular season game more than a tournament because they're focused on the major prize. However, when you're facing teams like in Atlanta, who would be lucky to see the second round, even though they've been performing pretty well this year and they made a couple of key additions, Dyson Daniels and Nance both were contributing for them. It was just a rough game. They weren't executing. Steals, turnovers were off the board. The rebounding was, they were completely dominated on the rebounding.
Yeah.
Second chance opportunities came for the Hawks.
Well, I mean, there was two things that were uncharacteristic from the Boston Celtics this game, that they were the best teams in the league last season, and it's been a reoccurring problem, are the turnovers and the offensive rebounding. Now, I get it. You don't have your 7'1" unicorn down there in the paint. However, that's no excuse. Rebounding is a team stat, and whether you have them or not, you should be more than capable to close out possessions. And Joe Mazzulla talks about all the time, and I said it on the last postgame show, and I'm kind of pissed off I have to even mention it again. Second chance points, those margin plays, right? That you're giving a team more shots on one possession, and that is killer. The Celtics tonight just allowed Atlanta to stay in this game off those turnovers and second chance points. It was the death of Boston tonight. And again, this was probably the worst game we've seen this core since the big moves to get Holiday and Porzingis. This is the worst game we've probably seen them play in a long time. I mean, through and through. Yes, that Bucks game last year was pretty ugly, but that wasn't an effort. That was effort. Tonight was a much different story. They got out hustled, they got outmatched, and they got really outclassed from the Atlanta Hawks, which is very rare. You don't see that often out of the Celtics team. So, again, we'll dive into it. Let's hop in, however, though, to the SeatGeek player of the game. Tonight, in his second game back from injury, guys, you probably guessed it, Jaylen Brown. Guys, Jaylen Brown is your SeatGeek player of the game. Before we talk about JB real quick, guys, the season is back and the Celtics are back and they're playing better than ever. Don't let tonight fool you, guys. The Garden is the perfect place to be right now for any live event. Even if you're not looking to go to a Celtics game, guys, SeatGeek has you covered. Use code Celtics Weekly for $20 off your first purchase. The link is down below in the description. We really appreciate SeatGeek for sponsoring us this year, and they are presenting this post-game show. Guys, tonight, Jaylen Brown, 37 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal to go alongside 64% from the floor in 35 minutes. Franco, if there's one positive I think we can take out of this game, it's Jaylen Brown's play. This is a guy that kind of came into the year. He was struggling. He had that hip injury. He hasn't looked the same now for the couple of games. He was able to come in here and play well tonight, Franco. So what did you like, what you saw out of Jaylen Brown?
This was one of the more comfortable games we've seen out of Jaylen Brown. Tonight, he was able to take advantage of his matchups that he had. The Hawks did a phenomenal job of taking Tatum almost out of the game at some points with the doubles, being able to switch And he was really one of the only players on the court that you could see the translation on the offense to defensive side. He was doing a great job of being able to slide out on defense, and it was just one of those games where Jaylen Brown was able to take over. And when he finds his mid range, that's when you know JB is having a good game.
This looked like finals MVP, Eastern Conference Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown, right? I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah.
I said it before this year. I'm not worried about Jaylen Brown. Him and
Yeah.
Jason Tatum are the last two players on this team that I'm ever going to worry about. We know how good they are. We know how good he is. Tonight he showed that. It's a long season. And like you said, he attacked the matchups very well. He came out of the gate, knocked down that first three. I think that was really good for him to see that first shot go down. 16 points in that first quarter out of JB. Doing that first quarter JB thing. So again, when you look at Jaylen Brown, you look at this game, that's the positive that you pull out of it, is that Jaylen Brown was able to really kind of get back into a rhythm. And, it's unfortunate that he had such a good game because it's a rare case, I feel like, when you see Jaylen Brown play at this level, to see the Celtics struggle as much as they did tonight, Franco. However, when you're looking at the box score, from the team stats, aside from Jaylen Brown, because I hate to not give him his limelight tonight. However, when you put up a performance like you just did, you're not going to be able to get talked about much. Franco, 100 field goal attempts for the Atlanta Hawks to Boston's 75. Now,
I'm no mathematician.
By no means am I a math man or a man that's super good with numbers. But I can tell you one thing: that's not good. By any means. And the Celtics were able, I guess, if you want to look at it in a positive way, they're able to lose this game by only a point, despite, Atlanta shooting the ball 25 more times. And, Boston, if you look at the box score, they shot 40% from behind the arc. They shot 51% from the floor, 82 from the line. It comes down to those offensive rebounds and those second chance points. And, you could argue the turnovers. However, the points off turnover differential was only +2 for Atlanta. So those didn't really kill them. Yes, it was coughing up possessions for the Celtics. It was that offensive rebound number, Franco, 20 for the Atlanta Hawks to Boston's 6. Now, where are you at? Because I will say, so far, 9-3 is by no means a bad start. However, for this Celtics team who had expectations, obviously coming off an NBA championship, and it felt like they were through the roof, it feels a little like they've dropped the ball here through these first 12 games. How nervous, how worried are you about these offensive rebounds, if any?
I'm not too concerned about the offensive rebounding. I think that it's just more of an effort thing, and it's going to come down to the performances of the wings and the guards that we've been harping on. Derek White and Drew Holiday download, being able to exploit and allowing those other people to get down low. But we've seen Kata doing a decent job down low. He's done great in his matchups that he had. Atlanta has two great rebounders on their team, Capella and Okongwu. They were laying up the board tonight, and they were able to get those extra looks. And I think it's just being more physical down low and being able to get those plays in the paint. And I think they're very selective, and they're living and dying by the three when they should had multiple opportunities to drive to the rim. There were plenty of shots that I thought they could have just blown by because the Atlanta Hawks were jumping at every single shot. They were smothering the Celtics on ball. And I think if they were a little bit more present in the paint, it would have came a long way, especially in the offensive rebounds.
Yeah. I mean, I look at those rebounding numbers, and that's all effort. Rebounding is effort. We've seen it with our own Peyton Pritchard, right? You can be the smallest guy out there on the court, but if you want that basketball and you have a knack for that basketball, you're going to get it. Tonight, if you go through the starting lineup for the Celtics, 6 for Tatum, 4 for Horford, 3 for Holiday, 6 for White, 5 for Brown. On the flip side, Atlanta's starting 5, 9 for Richache, 13 for Jalen Johnson, 9 for Capella, 2 for Cason Wallace, I believe, and then 3 for Dyson Daniels. So, again, right now, when I'm looking at the Celtics, it is an effort thing. It is, you got to go out there and you have to rebound the basketball, Franco, because what teams are doing now with the Celtics is they've realized that the key right now to beat this team with Porzingis out of the lineup is to get physical on defense and play handsy, like we've seen the Miami Heat do with this team for how long now? God, countless years we've seen Miami do it. Other teams are starting to pick up on that. We saw it against Golden State. We've seen it against Brooklyn, and now we saw it here tonight against Atlanta. They're getting physical on defense. On the offensive side of the ball, they are crashing the offensive glass. They're trying by any measure to get more shots than the Boston Celtics. And that right now, that right there is the recipe to beat this Celtics team. And I'll say this, if the Celtics don't adjust to that and don't find a new way to combat that and counter that, they're going to drop some games here. Now, I don't think it's going to cost them an opportunity to win an NBA championship, right? But I will say right now, when you see the Cleveland Cavaliers playing the way they are, you want to pick up some wins here. And especially in an NBA Cup game, right? These games are going to be competitive. Teams are going to come in there. They're going to want to win. And when you're the Boston Celtics, teams are going to play hard against you every night. So when you talk about that offensive rebounding number, that's kind of, been apparent all year now, is that the lack of rebounding from Boston. You got to look at the every player on this team, and you got to point the finger. It's not just one person, Franco. It's multiple.
Yes. Horford's playing his age. You can see that he's wanting to play a more conservative role in offense and defense. He's always going to have the IQ, but he's not going to be able to physically match up against these younger, stronger players, especially as the 5. And when they're playing the 5 out, you can see Tatum's nursing his ankle injury, and you could see that was affecting him tonight, especially on the effort end of things. There were a bunch of plays that the Hawks were even able to cherry pick on the Celtics, and Tatum was just jogging right behind him and not going for the contest. I think that it's almost looking like the team's banged up in game 12 of the season, and that's quite a concern.
Well, I wouldn't call it personally. I wouldn't call it banged up. Because all right, the next, like, yeah, that exactly. I
don't want to say that either.
I know, but it feels like with the Celtics right now, they're playing a little relaxed and they're playing a little complacent. And again, that's not surprising. This is a team that came off of an NBA championship win, a little championship hangover. I say in air quotes because they're still 9-3, and they, for the most part, have played pretty good basketball here. It might take them a little bit to play their best ball, especially when you have Porzingis out of the lineup. And like you mentioned, yes, Tatum was dealing. He was questionable coming into the tonight with that ankle injury that he suffered against Milwaukee because of Giannis can't, get his footing right. Hauser's missed some time. Brown's missed some. So the guys have been in and out of the lineup. That's no excuse, though, because this is an Atlanta Hawks team that's injury list was much more impactful and much more severe and long than yours was. And you're the Boston Celtics playing the Atlanta Hawks. This is a game you win. You're at home. It's the first game of the NBA Cup. You win tonight. You win, especially after dropping that game to Golden State. You win tonight. And it was disappointing to see how they played. Now, Franco, the second talking point we need to address here are the turnovers. 20 turnovers, which is super uncharacteristic of the Boston Celtics. Now, again, this is something that we're going to have to highlight here. I'm bringing that back from last year because over these past 4 games, Franco, the turnovers have been a struggle. Since that Golden State loss at home, we have seen, like I just mentioned, teams are playing this Celtics team physical. They are trying to run them off the 3-point line, and they're getting handsy off ball. They're trying to eliminate any off ball pressure they can, and they're playing the lanes. Now, Franco, when you look at what you've seen so far with Boston, turnovers are uncharacteristic. However, do you think there is an immediate fix that they can have? Like, what's the fix to this? Is it what needs to change? Because personally, you ask me, something offensively speaking, something needs to, I think, give here.
I think players need to start looking for their own looks and stop trying to force the plays. They are trying to fit within their own system too much, and they're not forming or budging around it, not calling audibles. They're sticking to living by the 3-point line, dying by 3-point line.
Right.
I think Tatum and Brown.
Celtic standards tonight, they didn't take, 43s for Celtic standards is rather low.
Right. And I think that they should have started to get to the rim more. That was something that Scal was bringing up, that the team needed to start attacking the rim. And I think that will lead to less turnovers. They were a little bit lenient on the calls tonight. They were not calling a lot of things on the ground, and they were calling a little bit more on the 3-point shots and fouls from the refs. But I think that's no excuse. You can never blame the refs. That's the sorry thing to do. I think that just being able to utilize the talent that they have, their athleticism, there were times that Brown or Tatum was matched up against Ricochet, and you can tell that they could physically win that battle, but it seems like it was something that they couldn't overcome, and they were just trying to keep on keep on going for it.
I agree. That might be this Celtics team Achilles heel, is physicality. We mentioned it. What teams are doing to us on the defensive floor in the rebounding, that's physical, right? Right there, those are physical basketball traits. Rebounding the basketball, playing, getting into the paint, playing aggressive. That's all a physical aspect of the game. And the Celtics have been terrible at every physical aspect of the game so far this year. They are relying on the 3-point shot. Now, I saw a stat from Adam Taylor, who does a phenomenal job covering the Celtics, and he has some great stats. And the Celtics, on 88% of their 3-point shots this season, Franco, have been considered wide open, which means wide open or open. So that means on average that the defender is at least 4 feet away from them on threes, which I don't hate. I love that. That's great. Open threes. Those are good looks. But you want to see a more physical style brand of basketball out of the Celtics at times, because we saw it in the playoffs last year. Even when that shot is kind of there, but isn't completely there, you need to play a physical brand of basketball, especially if other teams are going to come out there and play physical against you every single night, right? Yes, relying on that 3-point shot is awesome when you're playing, excuse me, an Indiana Pacers who kind of don't play as physical as you, and they also rely on the 3 and they're running gun, right? Kind of like Golden State, but Golden State has shifted it. So again, when you look at the turnovers and you look at the Celtics physicality, those are all fixable. Get into the paint. It takes just a little bit more effort. You need to build your game from the inside out. The Celtics were doing that last year. They're not doing that this year. And I think that's kind of been a reason for these slow starts recently offensively, is because if the first 7 shots from behind the arc don't fall and they go 1 of 7 and the other team gets into the paint, then the Celtics find themselves in a 14-3, 16-3 hole. And you can't let that happen, Franco. You just can't.
Yeah, and you look at the team that's undefeated right now, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they are doing pretty much the exact opposite of what the Celtics are doing on the court. They're playing physical, defensive basketball. They're out rebounding other teams. They're able to create their own looks, and they're playing hard-nosed basketball. And
Right.
something that the Celtics are more than capable of. We've seen it in the past. And even when the game is coming down to the line tonight, they were able to turn it up with 5 minutes remaining, and it just comes down to execution for that.
Well, here's my question to you. Why? Why has the Celtics lost that little sense of physicality that we saw from them at times last year? Why isn't it there?
I think that teams they're going. I think Joe is doing a good job of trying to keep that energy. We love the Joe Mazzulla ball, the immediate quotes that we're getting from him, the put the red dot on our forehead. We want that. I just don't think the team is living up to what
It's not translating. It's not
right.
translating. And that's a problem, in my opinion. That is because if there's one thing that can be there, right? Your 3-point ball, you can have a game where it's an off night, right? If there's one thing that's there, it's your physicality, right? Every night, you can rebound the basketball well every night. You can play good defense every night. And the Celtics, you cannot turn the ball over almost every night. If you just, those are things you can control. And the Celtics were amazing at doing that last year. They were phenomenal. That's what made them so special. So many people want to mention, the Celtics were amazing because of their all-star talent and their three-point shooting, and which is true. But what made Boston so good was their ability to control every aspect of the game that they had the ability to control. They were the first in the league in rebounding. They were top 5 in turnovers. They were phenomenal at controlling the game, controlling what you every night can control. They're terrible at that this year.
Right.
I mean, they have taken a real step back in that department, and that's worth noting.
Yeah, most of the games, it seems like the Celtics, I would say the past 4 or 5 games, it feels like the Celtics haven't had control of the game, and it's been playing catch up.
Right.
I think that's no way to play. They should last year we would see the Celtics starting off the game with a 23-point run, and they would have a 20-point lead with 5 minutes left remaining in the first quarter. And
that's a good point that you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to play off that because that's a great point you make. Because when you look at what Boston's done, there's a lot of times where they're going on a run and they go up by like 7 or 8 or 9, right in that like little area. And I mentioned, I want to say you were there for this post game show, and I mentioned this, right? That 7-point margin swing, right? That when you're either down or up by 7 points, that could arguably be the most pivotal time of the game, because if you go on a 6-0 run, you're down by 1. But if you let up a 6-0 run, you find yourself in a double-digit 13-point hole. And in today's NBA, it's not impossible to come get out of. It's pretty frequent, but it's still a bigger hole than 7, obviously, right? So Boston this year, it feels like they're doing a great job at getting that initial run going, right? 7-0. And then there's a defensive lapse. And then there's a turnover. And the next thing you know, the other team is only down 1, and they're right back in the game. And we saw exactly that from Atlanta. Boston wasn't able, Franco, to execute. And what do you like? What's different in their execution this year versus last year? Because their execution has taken a real step back.
It seems like the rotations have changed drastically. I feel like there are matchups that when Joe Mazzulla puts a lineup on the court, you're like, okay, this one's going to be successful. And then he'll go in and he'll throw together a who knows, a Tillman-Cornette combo when they're during that 7-point swing. And that's when all momentum is lost. I think the Celtics just need to find those lineups, those matchups, the 5 that like to play well together, even getting the rotation players in there. Like, how is there having him comfortable with Tatum or Brown on the court with him?
Well, that's a good point, because we've seen, and we saw it tonight, we've seen this new rotation that Joe's running, and it consists of Jason Tatum playing the entire first quarter. Now, last year, Franco, if you remember, Tatum would get subbed out every game at the 6-minute mark, halfway through the first quarter. This year, all of a sudden, now Tatum's playing the whole first. And tonight we saw Brown play the whole first, and they don't check into about halfway through the second quarter. And that's a long time to be without your 2 best players on the floor. Where are you at with that rotation and that concept that Joe's been running? Because personally speaking, I loved it when you had Tatum out there for the first 6, you had Brown out there for the next 6, and then you had Tatum come in for the next 8 of the second quarter. I think that was a much better way to go about it from Joe Mazzulla, instead of just kind of throwing your second unit out there for 4 minutes to play together and string together, hopefully, what is an even box score in the second.
Yeah, I think they're just playing. We know Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can play independently. When they're the sole scorer on the court, they're able to live up to it. I think that they're almost experimenting. It seems like Joe Mazzulla is experimenting with lineups, even though the team has barely changed over the past year. And going into last year, I think the chemistry should be there. They should know what's bread and they should know what's butter, and they should be putting it together. And it just seems like they're trying to work the Jordan Walshes in a little bit more. It seems like they're trying to develop a little bit more trust in their bench. And it seems like they're trying to conserve their star players a little bit more. But I think having Tatum and Brown play the first quarter and together is something new and something that
they should steer away from instantly. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Don't do it. Stop doing it. It's dumb and it doesn't work. And it didn't work tonight. And again, you can't afford right now, especially with Kristaps out, to just play a 6-minute stretch of basketball, 7-minute stretch of basketball without two of your best players out there. There's no reason for it. There should be either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or both of them on the floor for 48 minutes of the game. And and that's just, I feel like for me, that's basic knowledge. And it's weird and interesting to kind of grasp and kind of figure out why Joe steered away from what was working last year. I don't know if it's the Kristaps injury. I don't know if it's the sudden emergence of Peyton Pritchard that's doing it for Joe and putting the confidence in Pritchard to run the second unit. But if you remember, because I remember it so clearly, it was Holiday and Tatum. They were out first, right? And then D. White and Tatum, or excuse me, D. White and Brown would run the second unit, and they worked so well together. And you had Kristaps in there, and then boom, it's flip flop sub time, right? Maybe sometimes Tatum would check in with a minute left in the first or two minutes, whatever it was, right? And then now it was Drew Holiday and Jason Tatum's turn to kind of run with the second unit, and that's a much better approach. And I think it's an approach that Joe Mazzulla needs to look at moving forward with the Celtics, because again, it hasn't been awful. They're 9-3, right? They're still the second seed in the Eastern Conference, right, but they're not playing up to the expectation that they should be. And they're playing down against opponents. And these are problems that we had seen with Celtics teams that had come short and fallen short of the NBA Finals. And there were problems we didn't really see at all at any point of the season last year. And it's worrisome, I think, as Celtics fans. And, we talk about that second unit, Franco. Tonight, the second unit was non-existent. They had 12 bench points, 6 of them coming from Hauser, the other 6 coming from Peyton Pritchard. Pritchard, I'm a little bit more he's played so well. You were expecting Pritchard to have a down game. It was in due time. But for me, I look at the use of Hauser and especially Neemias Queta tonight. Those are two players that you have to utilize with their time in there. And Hauser was shooting the ball exceptional tonight, 2 or 3 from behind the arc on 3 great looks at it. They needed to get Hauser the ball more. They need to get Queta the ball more, obviously. But, for you, when you're looking at the bench, how did the Celtics, or what did they steer away from with using Queta and Hauser tonight?
I think just putting them in situations with the matchups, as we said, lineups are huge. I think Queta does a phenomenal job. He's one of the only ones on the court that I will feel confident in a box out against another league's starting center. I think that he does a phenomenal job of holding it down in the paint, and they're just role players that need to. I feel like they're trying to make role players a little bit more versatile than they need to be. I think Sam Hauser, has done a great job of growing his defensive game, but we shouldn't need to rely on that. We shouldn't need to rely on Queta's athleticism for them to score. I think they should be finding their place in the game through the star players, not the other way around, which it has been.
I love that point. You got to utilize the players that are out there. And tonight the Celtics didn't do that. Hauser needed to get more looks. They needed to listen. You got to get into you got a guy that's 7'1" and can jump out the building back there, playing that dunker spot. Utilize him, get downhill and throw him the ball. And those are easy points. And those are points. You got Holiday, you got White, you got Brown, you got Tatum and Pritchard. Those 5 players right there who can get downhill and get into the lane almost at ease. Anytime they desire, they can get into the lane and get a good look for their big man. And on the flip side, if that low dunker spot isn't there and that defense collapses and plays the paint, guess who's standing open for a 3? Sam Hauser, and that gets a ball. So again, it's like it all starts with just that extra effort out of Boston. And it's coming, I think, with it's showing up on the box score. The bench players aren't performing, exceptionally well. And the tell for me is Hauser and Queta, because Pritchard can get his own shot, right? Yeah. But Hauser and Queta, those guys rely on the upper tier of players on the Celtics, the White, the Holiday, the Brown, the Tatums, to get them the ball. And they didn't. Now, I have another question for you, Franco. Obviously, Neemias Queta, not the best game tonight. He's had a phenomenal first 12 games of this 2024-2025 campaign. However, let me ask you this question because I think it's worth talking about. Do you think it's time to move Al Horford to the bench and move Neemias Queta up to run with the starting five?
Matchup wise, I think that the centers are the Celtics have four different centers if you're counting Tillman, Fournette, Queta, Al. They all play different roles. Or excuse me, Tillman and Horford, you would run on a 5 out. You put in Fournette and Cato when you need a big man down low to clean up some glass. I think that being able to utilize them and knowing which matchups are good for them. You don't want Horford matching up with an athletic Okongwu because it seems like they lost their step. And I think that
But what is it for like why to me Neemias Queta is the better player right now over Al Horford. And
right.
you're not gonna Horford's not the starting guy when Kristaps comes back and he's an older guy. So why play him there?
And I feel like Al Horford will have a better chance of being able to find his looks and have better
In that
matchups if
in
he's
that second unit.
against the second unit.
Exactly right. I think that is something that Missoula needs to look at. And especially when you look at what the Celtics have struggled with: energy, physicality, rebounding. That
That's not
describes
something that
Neemias Queta's strong suits. Boom, 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 boom. Like
and Horford's weak
those
points.
three. Right. I mean, seriously, right now, Al Horford is old, reliable. He is going to be there. He's going to make big shots. He's going to make big plays, right? Down the stretch, yes, you roll with Al Horford, right? He's the guy you trust. He's your vet. You roll with Al. But to start the game off and to lean more heavy on should be Neemias Queta. He should play 30 minutes a game right now for the Celtics. He should be with the starting five. You need to lean on him a little bit more with Kristaps out because right now what Boston is missing is something that Neemias Queta can give you. And I don't think Missoula has leaned on him enough. And I expect to see him play much, much more, Franco, moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's just the trust that needs to be developed. He's just beginning to find his strides in the rotation. Last year we didn't see much of him. I think that we're going to see a lot more of him in his development because he's still a project player in an essence. I feel like that there's still a lot that Neemias Queta can add to his game. He can add more IQ. He can find out when to go to the backside of the defense to be that lob threat, being able to get the looks that he's going for, feel comfortable to put his hand up and call for the ball down in the post and be able to back down a center and kiss it against the glass and put it in.
Right.
I think that it's just being able to get him those types of looks and almost get him to that confidence level because we'd be asking him to step into a role that is something that almost is where we would be considering him into a starting echelon of player, and if he's ready for it, by all means. But I think it's just working him slowly into that player because I feel like
Right.
he could be a Clint Capella in the NBA when he reaches his full potential.
Right now with the Celtics, it is all about getting that physicality aspect back into your game. Why isn't it there? And figure out and play the players that can bring you that. Now, this is essentially the almost identical rotation. And this loss is not the end of the world. And we're not doing that anymore, Celtics fans. We're past that. However, it is worth noting what the Celtics have struggled with the start of this year. And there are some things that they have struggled with that are pretty simple fixes. And it's just an effort thing. And that's good news for Celtics fans because this team has all the talent in the world. We know that. Everyone knows that. This is still the best team in the
You,
league.
you saw it with the final 5 minutes of tonight's game. Even though it ended in a loss, they were
Right.
able to find their looks. And when it came down to, oh shoot, we need to execute and to get ourselves back into this game, they were able to do that. Even though there were still defensive lapses, I didn't like the amount of open looks that the Atlanta Hawks were getting and what the Celtics were giving up. But
Right.
I
Well, let's talk
once
about that
again,
last play. Let's talk about that last play there. That was drawn up. It was an
yeah,
ATO on the corner that got Tatum the ball. The look was there, miscommunication. And again, it's so uncharacteristic of the Boston Celtics to turn the ball over with 4, 5, or 6 seconds left, excuse me, in an ATO play. So again, for you, first of all, what are your thoughts on the drawn up play? Did you like it? And where do you think it went? I mean, obviously we know where it went wrong, but what was your overall, thought process during that play?
I think they're falling way too victim to the first first play they draw is getting Atlanta took the take foul and then found out what play the Celtics were running. I think that has been a downfall in the past few games that the games have came up short, and it seems like a new trend that the coaches are starting to do against the Boston Celtics or in closer games is to get that take foul, and they're literally reading the play. And I just think having that audible, they have enough talent on the court that you could feel confident with almost anyone on there to take that final
Right.
shot.
Take that
Well,
shot. Exactly.
even if Al Horford ended up with the ball, I'd be fine with him taking a mid range for the win or for the game. But
I think execution in the last 20 seconds is something that Joe Mazzulla and the Boston Celtics have struggled with here for in his tenure with the Celtics. And it was there last year. Let's not forget it. We saw multiple games that the Celtics lost in the last 10 seconds because they couldn't execute, or it was tied up and the game went in overtime and we dropped it in overtime because it was a poor execution. I liked the look. I think
right.
the concept was there. It was 6 seconds left. You gave Tatum a look at the rim and a play to either go up with it and finish or kick out for an open three. I think the concept was there. The execution aspect wasn't. Now, if we run that play 100 times, I think we inbound the ball successfully about 97% of the time, 97 times. So again, we're going to have to wait and see with more close games with the Celtics squad. Now, last year they had the luxury of, they didn't play in many close games. This year, we're seeing it more and more. I mean, 12 games here, and it feels like at least 6 of them have been decided within the last 2 minutes at least. So
they've also been very short scoring, very competitive games. I think the Celtics haven't had too many of those 120 point performances that we were accustomed to.
Right. So listen, it's a lot of things to highlight and note here. I think I want to see the next 10 games. I want to see a great span of basketball from the Celtics. I think tonight should be a little wake up call for them. That this isn't easy, right? It wasn't easy last year, and it won't be easy this year. It might be 10 times harder, quite frankly, this year, Franco. So maybe a wake up call was needed for the Celtics. And maybe tonight was exactly that. As the Boston Celtics, they fell 117 to 116 in the first game of the group play aspect of the Emirates NBA in-season tournament cup. Now the Celtics will get a chance to redeem themselves tomorrow night, November 13th at 7:30 p.m. as they play the Brooklyn Nets on the road, Franco. It should be another good game. We saw Brooklyn just the other day, and we're seeing them again. Guys, after the final buzzer sounds, in that Brooklyn game, come right back here to the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel. We'll have you covered for Celtics Talk Weekly post-game live. Again, tonight's SeatGeek player of the game was Jaylen Brown, 37 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 steals for the NBA Finals MVP. It's good to see JB back at it. Guys, unfortunately, the Celtics dropped their 3rd game of the year. However, guys, you know the drill. Unfortunately, we're cueing the music after a loss, but as always, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, go Celtics.
That version.